committee meeting today. I'd like to welcome you and welcome our staff and our CEO and our fellow elected members. And we'd just like to start off our herd today with a karakia.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. He ake ana o te atura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Good, Kelly, thank you. So in terms of deputations, we don't have any today. However, we do have our staff to speak to some quite detailed agenda items today. And in terms of any apologies, any apologies, I believe is near.
Worship the meeting.
Great. I'm happy to move.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. I also note that we have no apologies from Councillor Matty Radich, and we haven't had him in attendance at this committee for some time, and we'll need to proceed with full removal from the committee through our CEO and me in terms of those processes, just to ensure that he's formally not part of the membership of this committee any longer. So I'll note that there in the notes, thank you. So we have the confirmation of the minutes. I'm happy to move.
Happy to second.
Councillor Smith, any comments or feedback? Changes? No, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to our reports today. And we have for item 5.1 our priority seal extensions program. Oh, sorry, rubbish collection 5.1. Okay. So, sorry, my agenda here online isn't reflective of that. We'll ensure that we get that.
Would you like me to move that, Madam Chair? Happy to second that recommendation, Madam Chair. The Infrastructure Committee requests the approved collection point at the intersection of Waikare Road and State Highway 11 Kaupakawa is closed, and agree that future decisions concerning collection points are delegated to operational staff in consultation with the appropriate community board. I moved and Rachel seconded.
Thank you for that, and I'll just ensure that the staff have the updated electronic agenda as well in future. Thank you. So we've had it moved and seconded, and as the mover, would you like to speak to this item?
Certainly.
I'm sure that you have an interest in.
Yes, I do have a bit of an interest in it. So it's not really a conflict of interest, but so I don't live there, but my nana lives on the corner of that road, and since it became a pickup point, it has become abused. There was a community initiative to build a barricade, but when we saw like the volume of bags that gets put there, you couldn't even build one of those barriers around it to contain it. There's upwards of 20 bags that were being placed there, and not on the pickup day. So most people know that you put your bag out, Monday night or 7:30 in the morning on Tuesday at that pickup point, but there's non-compliance, and bags were getting put there every day of the week. Kids catch the bus there on that corner, and they're seeing rats, dogs are getting into the rubbish bags and causing a mess. People are putting, non-paid bags there as well, and boxes of bottles. So it's become a cost for the ratepayer, having to pick up, the stuff that's in unpaid bags. And unfortunately, it is bad behaviour that has meant that the people who have been using it the right way are now going to have to travel another 7 kilometres to the Whangai transfer station, which is on the way to Opua. But that's what we did before that pickup point was there. So everybody just needs to get used to doing what they did beforehand. Or they can take their recycling, bottles and cans and plastics, to the recycling station in Moeroa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. As the seconder, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I fully support the recommendation from the community board. Sitting at the table, the debate was really robust, but really supportive. I really note that the appetite from the board was to continue to work with communities to make sure that their pickup points, their collection points and their rubbish collection was fit for purpose at a local level. And I want to acknowledge that Simon was at the community board meeting to speak to this, which had a really large value to the board. They really appreciated that, so I wanted to acknowledge that. I just wanted to point out to elected members, there are locations listed on the petition. They're not accurate reflection of where those people live. A majority of them seem to default to Auckland, and it must have just been a template of the petition, but I know a lot of those people personally, and they certainly don't live in Auckland. I wanted to pick up particularly on the point that Kelly raised about the rats, something that was not debated but discussed at the community board level, and it's an awareness that I have from the people that I know from this petition. Those rats have been named by the children who use them. They have a relationship with those rats now. That's how much of an issue this has been, and it's been an ongoing issue. I don't know how that sits with you, but it doesn't sit comfortably with me that we've got kids naming rats at our rubbish collection points. So I am fully supportive of this resolution today. I did have one question though. I note in the recommendation B, agree that future decisions concerning collection points are delegated to operational staff in consultation with the appropriate community board. I'm in full support of that. However, I note on page 23 where it talks about the reason for that recommendation, there's nothing within that in terms of how the process will ensure that community boards participate in that. And I'm just wanting some guidance as to what policy or how that will be secured so that those community boards are worked with in those processes. Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's somebody who could answer that question.
Would it be?
So through the chair, the intention would be that we would consult with the chairs of the appropriate community board. The intention would be to streamline the process, and you'd be aware that you've been through the community board and now to infrastructure committee to get what is a decision on what is a relatively simple matter, and we're just looking to streamline that to make that more to speed up the process, but we would consult with the chairs and community board before taking any action.
Madam Chair, while I appreciate Andy's response, I just want to signal that that wasn't the intention of the community boards when they requested their inclusion with this delegation. I respect that working with the community board chairs is a streamlined process. However, when we talk about naming rats, I think that indicates the level of significance of this item to our communities, and I would be preferring that there was a more robust process, not necessarily a report to community board, but I would appreciate that it's considered that that may be more than a conversation with community board chairs. Member Gardner may want to speak to that. I'm not looking to seek any change today, but I just wanted to raise that and raise my concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So I know that you're not wishing to move a formal amendment to the current motion. We have Councillor Hughes.
Madam Chair, I go with the community board recommendation. So I'm happy that this be done, but I do wonder whether we're addressing that there is a correct level of service going on here, because I noticed that there was one bag left there and great volume of bags being left there, and so I think we have a bigger problem here. And by removing this collection point, therefore, I do wonder how much more will there be illegal dumping. So while I'll go with the community's request, and I agree with all of that, I think there's more work that we need to do around this whole area. And that goes for other areas in the north as well.
Thank you, Councillor Busich. We have Councillor Colo and then Mary Gardner.
Yeah, look, I support the necessity perhaps to close this dumping site, this collection site. However, I become concerned that maybe we're promoting the illegal dumping that has been a problem ever since I've been involved in council, and even with the 3-year holidays that you fellas gave me in the middle of it. It has been an ongoing problem. It has been a cost to council to clean all of that up. And I just wonder whether there's anything else that we can do that would help with the collection of the rubbish, rather than making people drive 7 k's or whatever it is.
Thank you, Councillor Colo. Sorry, is that a question?
No, I was just making more of a statement.
Just a metaphoric statement. Thank you, Councillor Colo. Mary Gardner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support this as well, but we do have several areas that I could probably name in our area that are becoming collection points as well, which are, I noticed that the yellow bags are there, but there's also black bags, and they're a huge problem. One of the problems is on the corner of Church Road and State Highway 10. We did have a major one at State Highway 1 on the corner of there and Fairburn Road, but I think that one's been sorted now, so hopefully I don't notice any problem. I've only just opened the second week, so, but thank you.
Thank you, Mary Gardner.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Will Councillor Corden then proceed?
I am concerned about the propensity that this will lead to illegal dumping. 7 kilometres is a long hike, and when people have become accustomed to putting their bags at the corner, expecting them to drive 7 kilometres to get rid of it in an approved dump site. Some will play the game, some won't. And sadly, in my years sitting here at this table, illegal dumping has not improved. And if anything, it's probably got worse. It comes at a significant cost when we find places like we did at Oromohori, where we have to bring in diggers to clean up big dump sites that the community have taken to, throwing all their rubbish down the bank. So what I would like to request is some feedback, either from Andy or Simon, as to whether or not we could monitor the impact of closing this particular site in regard to illegal dumping. So when we go forward as a council and consider things such as the solid waste bylaw and renewal of curbside access contracts to the water company, we have an understanding of what it is actually costing the ratepayer to go out and clean up. And this will help the community boards when they consider the closure of future sites. As an aside, my personal experience driving up Panari Road, there's a number of collection points that are now closed. There's a sign there from the council saying this is no longer an official or approved collection site. So obviously this has been going on for a while outside of this forum. I would also like us in time to have a considered approach about whether this model is the appropriate model for refuse collection in the district, or whether we make a really bold, ballsy and expensive call that we provide the service and it goes on every road, and that would take away the issue of illegal dumping. But that would come at a cost to the ratepayer. So just some feedback on the feasibility of providing some feedback on the impact of closing this.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Do you know to respond?
So through the chair, we do endeavour to provide elected members information on illegal dumping volumes through the business report, and those are recorded, broken down by northern and southern areas by month, which may help elected members going forward to So your question may have been related to the specific site-based volumes, and I'll Simon can comment further.
Sorry, take someone just to the centre. If you just stand up and centre.
Yeah, through the chair. We can attempt to see what sort of impact it has. Anecdotally speaking, the other sites we've closed, like Fairburn Road, Takao Bay Road, etc. Once we've closed those sites, after a couple of weeks, the illegal dumping at those sites, and to be honest, I was a bit surprised by it, has basically disappeared and gone away. However, whether it's moved 1 kilometre, 5 kilometres or up the road is hard to determine, and I don't know beyond illegal dumping at the site whether we'll actually know whether that behaviour has changed or not. Yeah, we'll be able to track the site, but not necessarily within the difference in other illegal dumping in the 5-10 kilometre radius. It's very hard to link them together, I guess, is the short answer.
Thank you, Simon. I also had a question. It was about what Member Gardner has raised for other sites. She's identified a site, and you've identified Fairburn as well. A number of people in the public have asked about the rubbish cages, and I'm not sure if that was the situation for this site, if they had the rubbish cage or not, and why they don't work. It says here that they've stopped installing cages, and I guess that's furthermore to Councillor Court's point, is if this is working as a system for our district or not, particularly when our recycling bins don't have any lids or ways of keeping in the waste, and it blows all of the recycling out unless you have a rubbish bag on top of it to prevent the recycling blowing out.
Yeah. So regarding the cages, there's no requirement under the current solid waste bylaw for the waste companies to provide cages. State the obvious, we don't contract out those services. They're independent private arrangements between the householder and the waste company. The cages, the issues with the cages, some people like some of the public like them, some of them don't. They certainly attract a lot more dumping at all times of the week. People, because there's an obvious place to put it, somehow people seem to think that, oh, okay, there's a spot for it, I can put my rubbish there. So the rubbish has been reported that it's there more often. Illegal dumping outside collection time has increased. Also, the volume of black bags or non-paid for illegal dumping has increased, which the waste companies need to share the cost of that. So that doesn't just impact us, it also impacts the waste companies. It's one reason they're against them, because of the increased illegal dumping there. And finally, some of the cages get stolen. So yes, they're not particularly keen on the ideas, although they do still have some in place. Was there another question, sorry, to the chair?
It was just furthermore to reiterate Councillor Court's concerns that if this is the appropriate method for rubbish collection and all roadside recycling pickup for our district, and in saying that the significant changes from central government that are occurring within the near future.
Yeah, so essentially, of course, it's not the ideal service, but it comes down to cost. A district-wide every street collection in an area like the far north would be incredibly expensive. Other districts like Kaipara, who do have a council-funded service, they go for a similar service that we've ended up with, as in collections from urban-type areas, but collection points in their rural areas. They also have problems with rural collection points. And just as a personal anecdote, I just got back from Christchurch, where they have the bells and whistles service, and I was horrified to see black bags in the countryside around there too. The other, once again, it's a personal comment, but unfortunately, some of the people who do dump illegally, it's one of their smaller sins in their lives, I have to say, and that there are a certain proportion of our population who are just that antisocial. The successes we've had at places like Fairburn Road from closing collection points, I think they are more the decent, normal people who, when there's one bag there, they think, oh, why not put another one there? Whereas when the site's actually closed, it has seemed to, in those places we've tried, it worked as far as reducing that immediate illegal dumping.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Councillor Visage, and if Councillor Court is wanting to move an amendment to Councillor Visage first, if you have comments before.
Yeah, I'm just picking up what Councillor Court said, which is going to be an amendment. I'll be pleased to support something like that. And it's really looking ahead. We have the contracts coming up for renewal, and maybe it is time, given the changes by central government, to look at options that exist that will allow us to provide a better service. And I think that means all the council needs to be involved, and community boards to consider what can actually be done. So we can't solve it here, is what I was going to say right now.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm not going to move an amendment because this report is specific to the Waikiri Road dump site, so it would not be appropriate to move an amendment at the point in time. But if, with your discretion, Madam Chair, can I ask an ancillary question? Dump sites collection points are being closed. Takeo Bay, Panari Road, Fairburn Road. I don't understand why this required a petition to have to go to the community board to come all the way here when there's clearly a process already in place where this can happen at an operational level. And I don't wish to overcomplicate this by creating yet more reports and more processes whereby everything needs to have a report, to go to the community board, to come to council, and so on and so forth. So surely this could be, if there's a viable alternative for a community, and I can speak for myself, I live in Waipapa, it's 2 minutes to an approved dump, 2 minutes. So there's no reason we can't drive there. Why can't this all be handled at an operational level? And why did this have to become such a big item that had to come to council for a decision?
Thank you, Councillor Court. Would you like to respond?
So through the chair, we did receive a petition, and there is a standard process for within council for dealing and managing petitions. Part of that process would be looking at getting community board involved in terms of the decision to at an operational level, and there is, and obviously the community board doesn't have that delegation, so it has to come through infrastructure committee, and hence the second part of the resolution to ensure that in future, even where there is a petition, we don't need to deal with that through that mechanism. It does seem very long and drawn out, but it does reflect other discussions around the council table where elected members do want to get involved in operational decisions.
Thank you, Andy. I'm not sure if that's answered the question. However,
The question, actually, I would have thought that the issue at this, I'm certainly aware of the issue at this intersection. Councillor Stratford has articulated the community concerns at this intersection for a long time, and I think it's sad that it has come to the stage where the community had to write a petition. So without being overly critical, perhaps we could be a little bit more agile in the space to steal Councillor Smith's words, that we can just deal with it at an operational level and not pull a trigger.
thank you, Councillor Court. We have Councillor Stratford to write a reply, and we'll take to vote.
Thank you. So I probably just need to address that. The community requested this pickup point, what was it, 2014 or 15? It came about, and the community that asked for this pickup point aren't on that petition. So residents of, some of the residents of Pakaru, Karitu Road, Waikare Road, further into inland, and Waikino and Ranui Road, they're not on that petition. So there is a large part of the community that still really want that pickup point. That's why it needed a petition. There were people that raised RFSs, but there was still a demand for the pickup point. So I just need to speak, needed to address who's not in the room, who's not on the petition. They are going to be driving not just, 7 kilometres, it's a 21 kilometre drive for them to get to the Whangai transfer station. You know, if you're up the end of Ranui Road. And I think that it would be important for us to somehow monitor the area. Before this pickup point was in place, there was illegal dumping happening, and I won't name the places because we don't want people to know where they are. And there still is illegal dumping happening there. There was a project that Benz and council were working towards having a community rubbish pickup point in Waipare itself, but we've got, you know, a lot of whenua Māori land that is taonga tuku iho. It's precious and it's right next to a waterway, so people didn't want it there. So yeah, I really just needed to highlight the people that aren't in the room. There was, you know, there's still people that are going to take a long time to learn that they're going to have to drive further. And if we, I don't think having the data that you've got there, Madam Chair, in the report, Northern, Eastern, Western, will help us to determine whether the problem is being made worse with regard to illegal dumping. So if we could just highlight, I could highlight to Andy what areas that we need to make sure in that catchment aren't increasing. Yeah, the community need to be aware that having that rubbish pickup point could increase the likelihood of hazardous fires and more illegal dumping. But the petition has spoken, and that's why I'm supporting the petition today. Thank you.
Councillor Stratford. So we'll take that to the vote. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. We have item 5.2, Priority Seal Extensions Program 21-22. And there is a current motion for the Infrastructure Committee to approve the road sections prioritising the dust matrix as ranked 19/6/2021 for seal extension work in 2021-2024. B, approves authority to designate the Chief Executive Officer to procure and award the associated work for the approved 2021-2024 Priority Seal Extension Program within the available long-term plan budget. I'm happy to move that and do a second. And we have staff to speak to this item. And if our General Manager would like to speak to it and introduce the staff.
Through the Chair, thank you for this. This is the ongoing programme of seal extensions across the network, and it is an issue of significant public interest, and we're looking to bring forward not only the seal extension programme but other programmes to you as we progress through the year for your review and consideration. But at this point, I'll probably just ask Aaron to, or Calvin to just come and talk to you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, through the Chair and Deputy Mayor, members. So the current recommendation is to seek approval for all sites to deal with the LTP budget provisions. We do highlight the discussion item on, I guess, I'm not sure on your agenda what page, but through the section before financial implications, we've discussed that there is an overlap on one of the sites with West Coast Road that may be eligible for subsidy from Makakutahi. We also further highlight that as new information comes available, the rankings are subject to change, and therefore committing, our preference is to commit early and get planning underway to be able to deliver the full work program and plan, and give confidence and surety to everyone in the industry and our customers what we're doing. However, with the quite volatile nature of the dust matrix based on information, the council may want to consider apportioning part of that approval for 1 year or 2 years. And so hence I highlight the discussion item on managing the risks. And that they may decide to approve the first year or years 1 and 2, leaving further site prioritisation available for updating as data continues to be added. So I really, other than highlight the discussion that's available for this committee, I don't want to prejudice any decision making further than the data presented.
Thank you, Aaron. I note that the current motion that's been moved is for the approval of the seal extension work for 3-year duration, which is A, and B is delegated to start to complete. So that's the current motion that's been moved and seconded, and I'm happy for Councillor Ford as a seconder. If you've got any questions or queries related to the matter.
No, I just speak in support of the recommendation. I do accept that the dust matrix will always be a movable feast and will always change subject to revalidating the data. What I can say, since I've got several hundred of them, is the top ones don't move much. And it would be extremely unusual, something that's way down the list, to suddenly move to the top. It would be a set of circumstances that I can't imagine and that I haven't yet seen. So I have a reasonable amount of confidence that if we were to adopt this for 3 years, or if you adopted it for 1, 2 and 3 years, you wouldn't see much movement in the names of the roads that appeared at the top of the list. So I'm very happy with the 3-year program of work. I'm also incredibly mindful that there's a long lead-in time. It's not simply a case of going out there and sealing a road. Quite often there's legalisation work to be undertaken, there's consultation with landowners, there's all the driveway crossings that need to be considered, there's engineering, there might be resource consent. So if we allow the NTA to program a 3-year program of work at this point in time, I think they'll be much more able to deliver that. It'll be much more efficient and we'll get a better result for the ratepayer. If we were to reserve the right to revisit the list annually, I think there's a risk. It's a small risk, but I still think that there's a risk there that it may increase the cost, the final delivered cost of the project, and may actually push it out by construction season. So I'm delighted with this paper. I'm delighted to see the dust matrix alive. And when I read through all of these spreadsheets, I'm very reminded of the ad on TV. Give the hammer the job set done, pretty big job, eh? And there's an awful lot of roads on this list. So in the words of the late great Edmund Hillary, we'll knock the bastards off one at a time.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Can you sing that for us again? Yes, gosh, we've got a little hashtag for today, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What a hard act to follow, Deputy Mayor Clark. Thank you for that. Aaron, thank you for bringing this paper. I'm in full support of the resolution today. I just want to note that I am still in support of publishing the dust sealing matrix, which I know has been an ongoing conversation, and I know there is mixed thoughts about that, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to reiterate that. I did have a question though. I note on page 58 that there's a statement. During this period, staff also undertook further targeted investigation through which a further 39 marae with no sealed frontages have been identified in the region. Following that great work that you guys did to seal in front of those 10 marae at schools. And then I note further down in that page, a scenario whereby any savings achieved in the delivery of the respective sites in each financial year could be directed to the continuation of marae frontage dust sealing strips is welcomed for discussion. In such instances, trialling of innovative low-cost sealing alternatives should be encouraged because of their unique low traffic and often isolated remote locations, making conventional sealing more costly. I'm in full support of a discussion. I'm in full support of that being an outcome of this. And my question is, do staff require a resolution to this effect to be able to undertake that work should that scenario arise? I would really appreciate some response on that as to whether or not we need to consider how to enable.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Is to respond?
Did you want to respond to that?
With respect to that commentary, it would be helpful to assist us in facilitating the early procurement planning and implementation, including how we could flesh out alternative low-cost seals to suit those low-volume environments. So if that comment could be clarified in the decision-making resolution, that would guide us and assist us significantly. I note that Councillor Visic's commentary as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Madam Chair, I would like to move an amendment.
Thank you. And if you'd like to look at the wording of that, or do you
I've
have
just
that at
sent the
hand?
wording to Casey.
Thank you.
So the amendment is C, approves any savings achieved in the delivery of the respective sites in each financial year to be directed to the continuation of mid-eye frontage dust sealing strips in priority order as identified in Appendix 1, bracket mid-eye frontages to be sealed of this report.
Thank you. Can we just bring that up on the screen for the elected members and staff to have that at hand at Councillor Usage, if you'd like to speak to the item?
Madam Chair, if I can call for a seconder of that amendment once it's on the screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Fast, Kathy. Okay. So since we've got that there, I'm happy to second that current motion.
Madam Chair.
And a formal amendment. I'm just bringing it up there. Councillor Usage wishes to speak to the item.
The amendment sort of came out at the top of my signal to speak, so I'll speak to both those things, but more generally, as Aaron raised, I appreciate the work you're doing, Karen, and I'm a strong supporter of having a matrix. Having a matrix was to take away the political shenanigans that tends to go on, and instead choose the roads based on a clearly laid out and published criteria. So my comments are, we haven't yet put that out there. We should be putting that whole matrix out so that the public can see it with the criteria and how we're actually determining the priorities on the road. And that will actually help us significantly in updating, because one thing's for certain, people on that road will be very quick to point out any false assumptions. So I'll be really keen to see that. I'm a bit reluctant, and therefore also the second point with us around the table, changing the priorities on the matrix once we've done that, because that should not be something we're doing. It should be laid out and then made available for staff to prioritise ahead schedule to do that based on the matrix. I agree that things can change at any 1 minute, but unless we do that, we will face what we are facing at the moment. There has been the matrix being discredited. People are saying it's not showing accurate information, and that to me is quite disturbing, because one of the key things in doing all of this is to show that we're being unbiased, that we're covering every road in the region, and we're making it available to everyone to have a look at and comment. And I don't see that happening yet. Councillor Smith raised that, let's publish it. I'm not sure why we're not publishing it. There may be statements that we're probably creating false expectations, but that actually is not a valid argument in my view. So I'd like to comment on why, because that has been requested, why can't we get this out there so that will help staff get the accurate information coming through quicker, and we put a process in place that does that. In terms of this, yeah, well, the amendment I probably will support it because I can see that as being important, but it does sort of contradict what I was saying, that we need to actually have a matrix define the roads, which takes all of those things into account and get it out. Would you like to comment?
Thank you, Councillor Vusic. To our general manager, are you happy to respond, or would you like to respond?
I'll have a first stab at that one. Through the chair, quite interesting, we're sort of having this debate and we're looking at publicising the dust matrix in an item that's being considered in public session. So effectively, the dust matrix that supports the decision you're making today is already in the public arena. And that locks and loads the 3-year programme based on that set of information. Of course, in 3 years' time, when we come again to look at it, we consider the programme and produce the documentation to support that decision. So effectively, as of today, that matrix is in the public arena.
Yeah, if I can comment to that, it's not, that's not one of the things. I know that's in the public arena, I see it here myself, but to make it actually available online so that it's not sitting in a document somewhere, that's easily accessible, plus showing all of the roads, plus showing the criteria that so the calculations that lie behind it all, and the weightings are what's really important. That to me is that's the thing, because I can if I can sit there and pull the strings and parameters, I can make any road come to wherever I want. But we need actually to see that criteria and we assess the road and make it available so that the information that Sarah pointed out can come to the fore, and we get then the confidence that we're doing everything possible, even going overboard, to make that information available to the public. So that's really what my comment is.
Thank you, Councillor Vusic. We've got Calvin here.
Through the chair, while we've got no objection to the matrix being made public, and as Andy's pointed out, it is already public, what cannot be underestimated is the resource requirement to respond to inquiries and concerns regarding individual components of matrix scoring. So the effort that Kushler and the team put in has been probably 2 to 3 months of solid work to try and get the matrix to where it is. Every time we get an inquiry regarding the matrix, we have individual having to go into the data to validate a single thing. I would imagine that if we put this, part of the intent of this is to have it set for 3 years and allow us to data validate in the background. If we're data validating in the background and in the meantime having people questioning data that isn't moving, then we've got 2 sets of data that are sitting there. And also we will start raising questions if we start a live published matrix about why these have dropped or changed slightly and everything else. The reality is that unsealed roads and dust matrix inquiries take up significant staff time at the moment, and we have talked about this and anticipate you would be looking at effectively a full FTE resource to manage the inquiries related to the dust matrix if you publicised it fully and then encourage feedback and complaints. So my house is actually 28 metres rather than 25 metres, those sorts of things. We do that as part of our routine inspections. We've gone out, we've done traffic counts on a number of roads to increase the data, but that risk is that the more you encourage engagement, which we're happy to do on individual roads, but the more detailed that engagement gets about one of the individual one scores, the more we tie up staff resources. The other risk of that is you get improved data based on feedback from individual customers, which means there's a risk that individual roads change their ranking, where other roads may have errors in their data but haven't got active participants. So our current methodology is to use common methods of data across all attributes, so we're applying the attributes fairly and consistently. So it is out there, and when people ask, we provide them with information of where their road sits, but it is a very resource that we are concerned would become more resource hungry if we were to fully open this up.
Thank you, Calvin.
Through the chair, I'd also just like to reiterate Councillor Court's comment that It is unlikely that there will be, irrespective of errors in individual data sets, that the correction of those errors would make significant difference to the ranking of projects or votes. So the value of the litigated relative number on a regular basis in terms of the changes to the prioritisation would be called into question.
So,
Can I have a go?
Thank you, Councillor Paul. We have Councillor Frederick.
Yeah, I just need to catch your eye because you don't look this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh dear. Something that I've raised in the past with the matrix is the fact that you might not have a school nearby, but you'll have groupings of children standing in the dust waiting for a school bus, waiting to catch buses. Groupings of children walking along unsealed roads such as Orako, Matawaia, Maramaku, Pukapu Road and Rafiti Road, waiting alongside the road to catch a bus. We don't take that into account.
through the chair, the matrix as it sits currently takes into account the attributes that council recommended. We've had a previous workshop late last year where it was highlighted that some of these attributes may be not appropriate and other attributes may need to be added. I suggest separate to this paper, and we would have 3-year cycle to do it if this recommendation is approved, that a workshop be held with elected members and RM and Kushler and the team to actually validate and discuss whether these are the appropriate measures of matrix as the community sees them and as council sees them. But it is, as we've said in the paper, this is the recommendation based on the approved matrix attributes as they sit at the moment, recognising there are gaps in how that's developed for some areas of the community.
And so it sits comfortably with everybody that there are children, having hazardous dust inhaled while they're walking alongside the roadside or waiting at the bus stops.
Sorry, Councillor Stratford, do you have any questions for staff?
Further to my comments, I'm not going to support it. I think that we've already workshopped this previously, as Calvin said, and I highlighted the fact that not every road is the same. Also, forestry, we can't lock in for 3 years. Forestry, we don't know, 3 years in advance whether Matawaia Maramaku is going to be another route that logs get taken out on. We don't know when the next detour along Pukapu, Matawaia Maramaku Road is going to be used, when the state highway closes for an accident or a slip. That's one of the detour routes, as is Ruapikapika, and whilst we've got seal happening at one end of Ruapikapika, it's not happening directly in front of the people at the other end that are affected by dust. So I'm not going to support adopting this for 3 years. Thank you.
Councillor, we have comments from Councillor Court, and we have Mike Emmons online following.
You mean the resolution back up on the screen?
Thank you.
I have concerns about the amendment, and my concerns about the amendment are that the dust matrix picks up Marais. It already factors in Marais, just as it does schools, churches and health centres. As the author of the dust remit, the person that kicked this whole conversation off, I'm actually quite offended by Councillor Stratford's comments that it sits okay with you that children are breathing dust while they walk to school. No, that does not. It does not sit well with me. We know from all the work that we did in Wellington in developing the information that supported the dust matrix that any exposure to dust breaches the World Health Organization guidelines and has adverse health indicators. So in my perfect world, no human would ever be exposed to dust, and no child would ever walk along a road that is exposed to dust. and no family would have to live in a home where they could not open their windows or hang their washing on the line or drink the water or let the children play in the yard. But that is not the world that we live in. The reality is we have over 1,800 kilometres of unsealed network, and we have 1,810 individual line items in this matrix. So we have to assessment criteria and work our way through that assessment criteria on a fair, equitable basis that takes the politics into the equation. So I am concerned that we've picked on Mariah up here, where this report doesn't tell me, are there any health centres on a gravel road? Are there any churches on a gravel road? Are there any schools on a gravel road? Or are there any other places of public worship or gathering on a road, on a gravel road? We picked on Mariah because that's in the report, but we haven't picked on everything else. So I'm really uncomfortable with the amendment because that may disregard a higher need. And the whole purpose of this was to put our robust ranking assessment criteria into the matrix. And Mariah already caught it. And Councillor Stratford, much as I may have taken offence to her statement, she actually raises a valid point that there should be in here school bus destination.
Yeah, I'm just going to spear.
Should be. I accept that. So I love the idea of the workshop, but I'm not going to vote in support of the amendment until such time as we've had a comprehensive and considered look at where any surplus funding could be directed, because there may be a better way. If there's a marae, it's only used once a year and half a dozen people go there, as to opposed to a school where there might be hundreds of children, is probably not realistic. We've taught them already in the matrix, but I don't have that information. The second point I wish to make is it's all very well putting the matrix online, but this is complex stuff. Roads are broken down. So if you look at there, they've got the start and the end. So if you look at Brass Road, it doesn't start at the beginning or at the end. It's in the middle. It's where the houses are. So it's talking about the length starting at 50 and ending at 1725. So it's a bit in the middle. And then you go along here, you talk about average daily traffic and all the rest of it. It's complex. And I know that when we first put it out, hundreds of hours of our input to talking to people and explaining the devil in the detail in the matrix. And it's not that people are stupid, they're really, really smart. But this is a whole different language and a whole different of complexity. And I don't want the NTA spending hundreds of hours responding to customer inquiry when they can be doing the work. I was really privileged in the development of the matrix to be able to sit down with France, and he showed me on his laptop what would happen if you altered the weightings. Ultimately, they didn't move. So I just want to support what Calvin is saying, that they would move a little, but it's never going to impact. And it's really the front page. Somebody sitting at 1,810 on this list is probably still going to be sitting at 1,810 on this list in 10 years from now. It's the ones on the front page that may change. So long speech, and I'll cut it short now, Madam Chair. I have very significant concerns with the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Court. Maybe have staff to respond about why the marae was specifically identified on page 64 of the agenda.
Thank you, for the Chair. In response to the reason that the marae is included as a supplementary item and option, is that we recognise that there's been campaigns in the past to try and say we're going to seal in front of all marae, and there was a supposition some time back that we'd achieved that, and then we found a handful that got us through last season's work, and then further research we discovered quite a lot more. The proposition of continuing that theme of work is to try and balance the overarching dust matrix, which looks at primary dust generation where significant vehicle movements are already captured, and it does include, is it a resilience route, therefore has it been considered as a detour for any state highway traffic. This is a logging route that is included in there as well, in school locations. That does not necessarily presume that because the school's on that road, the bus might go on another road, so that may be a gap you've highlighted. However, we believe the traffic movements are reflective of what is creating the dust and the worst case. So we are using the matrix to attend to the most problematic dust locations where volume and speed attributes that. The opportunity to use a small portion of any surplus to help continue dealing with this outstanding legacy of marae frontage ceiling has the benefit of going to those very low socioeconomic sometimes, but often low volume roads that will never see any investment through this matrix due to the primary weightings of the number of vehicle and the size of the vehicle, but still then demonstrate to that sector of our communities that you will progressively get some of those seals placed and the opportunity to do so in some innovative way that is not the gold-plated solution seal, but something that may actually help that community at a low-cost solution. And therefore, we sort of hope to deliver what the matrix intents were, in addition to fulfil a long-standing legacy and help those low-volume roads that would never otherwise get that investment in those locations.
Thank you, Aaron, for that detailed response. Member Edmonds online? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of points. The first point is, as I understand it, a comment was made a moment ago that the council has already had a workshop to discuss how the matrix is put together, the values and the weights of the matrix. And furthermore, the comment was made that a decision had been made. Am I getting that right? Because I've been here for quite some time, and I can't remember either a workshop to discuss the matrix in particular, the weightings and what the values were, nor a decision to be made. So can I just confirm that those both have been done?
Thank you, Andy.
I've got more. That's the first question.
Oh, sorry. Would you like to respond, Andy, to that first question, or Aaron? Or?
I can answer that, Madam Chair. A workshop was held, and council did adopt the matrix. We didn't turn our mind to the weightings applied. That was an engineering calculation, but we certainly had workshops and adopted the matrix.
Okay, thank you. That was how I understood it. Thank you, Anne. Now, from day one, many years ago when this matrix was brought out, I know both Councillor Vucic and I and a number of others have made the point that the factors in the matrix are a political matter, right? No, not the investigation, not the weighting, not the numbers. I mean, they are operations, but what goes into the matrix, the things that are important to us, are a political matter, and Member Stratford made that clear just a few moments ago. So while I guess this is not the right time to be changing the matrix, the fact that the public haven't got involved in the values side of that, even though we've been promised it almost every time the matrix has been brought up for the last 3 years, and we've been promised it again, it's disappointing to me. So this has been something that's been kept out of elected members' hands. So I'll be voting against this because I think 3 years is too long to set in stone, given that we haven't set the values, and given also we've been promised another workshop to discuss those values. So we've got our input has to be able to change the matrix, even though it may not change the order of the top 6 or the top 12. And the second thing is that Member Vucic brought up about putting this matrix online. Now, I find it quite distasteful that we should be discussing not allowing this information out in the public. And in fact, as far as I know, Lagoima doesn't carve out any exceptions based on people in the public might get interested and want to say about technical details. I mean, I don't know that that's part of the law. And indeed, I know of Lagoima requests for this particular matrix that have been turned down. So I struggle to understand I struggle to reconcile the fact that this is now on an agenda item, yet people who wanted to know where specifically their roads sat and how compared with everything else were specifically denied under a Lagoima request. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Member Evans. The staff have already responded that this is public and anyone can access this information. It's all fully public here.
Sure, but their requests under Lagoina were denied.
Thank you, Member Evans. I'm not aware of that situation, but I'm sure that you can address that with our CEO and staff at a later time. Calvin, would you like to respond?
Through the chair, with reference to the elected member involvement with the attributes. So in May, June and July 2019, there were multiple iterations of the matrix that were brought to the Infrastructure Committee and Council. And through that time, some of the attributes were discussed and slightly amended, to which point we came out with the 2019-2020 program, which was based on the matrix. At that meeting, it was a result of a prior meeting where everyone agreed on the matrix attributes without road names attributed to it, and then the road names were presented at the final meeting. The workshop we referred to was held in Kirikiri in either July or September last year, and immediately, and at that workshop, we discussed the fact that the attributes are what they are at present, and there is some work to be done on it. So that workshop was attended by about half of Far North elected members from council. And from that, we agreed that we would come with the marae frontage short notice plan for 2020-21. We also indicated at that time that we had a significant unsealed road traffic count program procurement underway, which was to validate the data. And that's all been done. We now understand the data as it sits, and it's, as we've mentioned before, ever changing. But we agree that the attributes in here remain a political decision, and we welcome any forum that we have to have a further discussion on it. The reality is, to get this paper ready, we started work in about October last year to make sure that the data is right. So part of the reason for proposing the 3-year program is each time we revalidate the data, you've got multiple checks, multiple cross checks to make sure that you're not changing anything inadvertently. And that's one of the core reasons for the 3-year program. But more than happy to, as I mentioned before, a further workshop with council where we can explain some of the areas where we think probably aren't as significant in the data attributes, and raise areas about how we may be able to address some of the others, like the ones raised by Councillor Stratford today.
And through the chair, I also like to clarify that the last season's sealing extension works was schools and maraes, and we can confirm that all schools now have been their frontages sealed. There may be an exception by definition of a koanga reo. That is not currently on our radar through Ministry of Education. If that was a definition of a school, they have not been 100% captured, and a lot of those are sitting right on the side of, they are part of the marae, and we could, we may presume that they could be caught up in that other supplementary program on any available surplus. Just to clarify, we have addressed the schools in the work done today. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Stratford has further questions or queries. Before Councillor Stratford has a second time to speak, Councillor Collar, would you
Yeah, I will be supporting the amendment, number one. And I think it's important that the marae are looked at, specifically listening in terms of those that were missed. And in terms of the matrix, I think that is the ultimate thing that we have that is not political, that we have looked at the attributes and allocated the priorities as a result of that. And I'm just thrilled that we have a mechanism in place that is looking after that. It doesn't matter what those roads are that qualify for the seal at the top, whatever it happens to be. There's always going to be somebody that thinks that they've been missed. It doesn't matter where, it just depends on where they're standing. So we're always going to get the anti-votes. repeat that I'm thrilled that we have a mechanism that takes that out of our hands and that there is a priority established as a result of an existing matrix that is working. We may not get it right all the time, but the end result is that we're going to have some more metres, kilometres of sealed roads in Tāmua, which we desperately require. Thank you.
Kia ora, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support A and B and C. Thank you. And
And Councillor Stratford would like.
Oh, just quickly, the roads that are in the top, to be sealed, they're fantastic. I know personally some of the people, because they've contacted me, I've sat down and listened to their concerns, but, I've got a whole heap of roads that aren't featured anywhere, they're not going to get sealed within the next 60 years with the way the matrix sits, not including kids that, are 25 to 30 kilometres away from the actual school and walk to their bus stop destination. And I am concerned about what I see, sitting down with people talking about their dusty roads. They'll get the dust suppressant. I know that's not here, but you use that matrix to make the decisions about dust suppressant. They see their road get dust suppressant 1 year and then it doesn't happen the next couple of years because there's no forestry, but there's still a volume of traffic. The foresters still go to there's no logging trucks, but there's still vehicles going in to do planting or getting the site ready for whatever. So yeah, we've just got the matrix is a tool that you look at on a desktop and it's not all interrogated as yet, and we're often the tool that has to interrogate that data, and I feel you guys are doing a great job. You addressed some of the areas, like the Waikare school got their seal in front of their kura, which is they've been waiting for that for ages. There's a lot of kura and marae that have been waiting for their seal in front of their marae, and marae might only have one event a year, but they get hundreds of people, and the people that live alongside that road, they get impacted by that dust. I'm just going on a bit now. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, do you have further comments as move up the amendment?
I do, but with your grace, Madam Chair, I would like to ask a further question following the information that we've obtained. So
that's fine.
I note that the amendment refers to Appendix 1, and so my question is around the prioritisation methods that we've used in that Appendix 1. So I note that the marae are listed in priority order, but my question is, are kohanga and churches attached to marae incorporated into that prioritisation? What is the defence mechanism to that process that was put in place?
So we can explain the prioritisation that's applied here is factored around the vehicle count information that was available. There is that cognizance of the church/urupa in that vicinity and stretch, and heavy weighting was where their residences immediately adjacent to that facility, that marae. That would then mean they, last thing we want to do is have a marae that sits remote from the other dwellings, has 150 metres of seal in front of it, and the people that live there every day, that when everyone goes to the marae, 200 metres away, have those 100 vehicles come past. So we've made sure that we get a level of common sense to, if we do that marae, we're benefiting the people that live there and support that marae over the ones that have a marae sitting further away from other dwellings that would be looking at that seal sitting there, and I wouldn't say unused, but not giving them that benefit. It also took into consideration the distance from the road, the standard matrix details applied to that ranking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am really mindful that there is some opposition to the amendment here, and I would really appreciate, this is something that I think I appreciate the opportunity that the NTA have brought to us in order to be more agile with our ceiling responses and achieve these outcomes. And I look forward to the workshop that we're going to have to talk about the values within that, and also understanding the weightings. I note that schools are weighted 10, churches are weighted 5, and Marae are weighted 3, and I would be keen to get an understanding further about how that works. But at the moment we do have this opportunity in front of us, and I would hate for that to be missed, and I would appreciate if any of my fellow councillors around the table have any amendments that they would like to suggest to satisfy them to this amendment to ensure that it goes through, then I would appreciate you guys asking for that.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I haven't spoken to either the original motion or the amendment, and I'd like to take the opportunity to do so, and Council Court can have the right to reply to the second if you wish to do. I wanted to raise the fact for the original motion, specifically that I'm really glad to see it come for a 3-year duration. I think that what we've seen for the shovel-ready projects and the amount of work that we've got done within the last few years, I think it might be 4 or 5 years. We didn't have any ceiling for 10 years prior to that, 0. And I think that this is a significant achievement and can be commended back to the NTA. I think this is reflective of how Whangarei deliver a lot more within their work programs by bundling it in for a longer duration, so that both contractors, the staff and the community know that it will be delivered within that time frame and can plan to the construction seasons and plan appropriately with both procurement, consenting, and therefore deliver it. I'm always sad for our community when we don't get our projects delivered in a timely manner, and there's a significant number of carry forwards, and that's why I feel that this type of approach is a much more well-reasoned and logical approach to all of our delivery programs, and I think our community boards have benefited from that for our footpaths in particular. If we can give governance direction in advance, it gives certainty our staff, it gives certainty our contracts, and it gives certainty for delivery for our community that we're here to represent and that we should be providing delivery for. So no matter what the actual roads are on this list, this method that has been presented to us today from the NTA provides that certainty. I do support the 3-year duration for that fact, and I would like to see this process rolled out throughout Council for our capital works delivery. So well done, thank you to the NTA. I wanted to support the matrix. I was surprised to not see that one of the criteria was if there was a councillor on the road. I thought Spain's Road might have been at the top of the list. That's a negative attribute. So that was a joke, but I'm sure that some of the other councillors may be surprised that that's not one of the attributes, or else Spain's Road might be to the top of the list. Further to that, I support the amendment, and particularly as a seconder. I think that as well gives certainty to the staff, so that we have that priced and programmed and to be able to be delivered so that we can see results. And I really appreciate the response from our staff that, and it's a logical response, that those roads may not ever get sealed, but that is something that can be done for a low socioeconomic environment that provides for cultural, economic and social needs. And I think that's reflected in the fact that a lot of these marae here on page 64, a lot of them are actually in the Western Ward, which has some of the highest levels of poverty and in our district, and I think that anything we can do to help that is always a positive thing for our community. So I'm happy with the current motion in the 3-year timeframe. Of course, everyone's going to have an issue with the matrix, because if it's not their road, then the matrix must be broken. I think that the point of it is to make progress for any of the roads in our Whānau district, to reduce the number of kilometres of dusty roads, because none of our children deserve that. You know, I haven't mentioned any specific roads that kids are on buses. There are hundreds of kilometres of kids that have to walk along dusty roads to get to their bus stops. You know, it isn't acceptable, but we need to stage it and have bite-sized pieces and deliver the ceiling projects within the construction seasons, and this will allow for that. So that's why I'll support that today. We have a right of reply from Councillor Ford, and we'll take the amendment.
No, it's not a right of reply, it's actually an amendment, Madam Chair, to the amendment, and it's particularly in relation to the priority order. So I've heard today that about Kahangareo, I've heard about schools. One of the things we haven't talked about is sports clubs, and in that prioritised list there is a sports club, a rugby club. This is about people. So what we need to do is we need to identify where the most people are and start to knock it off, and the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable to us are the children and the elderly, and those with underlying medical conditions are the ones that are the most vulnerable. So going back, what was the purpose of the dust matrix? To eliminate dust to people. So I'd like to see the identified list removed from the amendment, and to give NTA the opportunity to reflect on the concerns that have been raised at the table today, and go away and come back and say, actually, is that the appropriate order? And I don't know. I don't know any of these sites. I do know that your fifth one down is already captured in the resolution, West Coast Road. It's actually already in the resolution that we've moved. That doesn't actually need to be there. But if these could be prioritised based on Marae, Kohangareo, sporting facilities, adjoining facilities, and adjoining churches, and prioritise by the number of people that are actually potentially likely to be exposed, that would give me comfort and would remove my objection.
Thank you. As the mover, Councillor Smith, are you happy?
I am happy with that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I noted that NTA were nodding an appreciation as well, so I'm happy for that.
Thank you, and a second, I'm happy to move that. So we have an amendment on the table.
And bus stops.
And NTA will come back to us in terms of Part C, I'm sure. So we'll move the amendment that's currently. Thank you. Our general manager was just reminding us of the workshop that we'll be having as elected members, and we can bring that up at the workshop. So the current wording allows for the staff to have that discussion and direction from elected members in that workshop. So thank you for that clarification to our general manager.
Sorry, just a question. So we lock in this, we have a workshop. If we decide that we need to add another, what's it called, criteria to the matrix, what is the next step after that?
Through the chair, that criteria would be added to a future decision paper for the 24 to 27 road frontage, or any extra funding that council made available through this period. So, this decision is about this program, and just going back to the comments made by the chair, it is the NTA's intent wherever possible to bring forward 3-year programs. Unfortunately, some of this is a little bit constrained due to funding uncertainties, but the likes of resilience sites, renewals and rehabs, the intent is to bring forward 3-year programs to council to do that. And if I may, can I just quickly acknowledge the work that Kushla and Diana and Franz previously and Aaron have done to bring this piece of work. It hasn't been easy and at times it's been quite stony. But yeah, just want to acknowledge the work they've done and bring this paper to council.
Thank you, Calvin, and question on Aaron.
And to clarify, for our understanding to take away this, the appendix 1 for the maraes, we will clarify the basis on which the prioritisation has been made today, including consideration and clarity on known koanga reo and specifically bus stops / bus routes that may or may not have been in there. And I can confidently say that we understand where we are with that one that mentioned about a sports field, where it's in ranking. It relates to being a dead-end road, and so therefore speed and dust generation to 2 houses at that section beyond it for the sports field component wasn't flying a high flag of dust nuisance. But that's the clarity that we will come back to you with to give confidence in the ranking meeting favour with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Our Chief Executive would like to comment, and then we will have no further questions and move on to voting on the amendment and the substantive motion.
I just wanted to thank elected members for the buy-in to the matrix. It's not perfect and it won't ever be perfect, but I don't know if you remember the not so good old days where these conversations were just completely subjective and political and difficult for everybody and for relationships. And so this really honest attempt at objectivising something that's really complex. And I would just refer to Kelvin and Push and others who are dealing with this. There's a hell of a lot of work goes into it. It's really cool to see everyone disputing the detail of a bought into methodology rather than something completely different. This is the right place to put our attention and to question the matrix rather than question that we should have one. So we're grateful. We did put this up for a national award. We think there are a lot of other councils that could do with objectivising their choices around the rating. It did make a short list, unfortunately, but it was worthy of contention. So thank you very much, guys and girls, for the work that you put into this, and for the Roading 101 annexes in here about things that are frequently asked questions and stuff about roads. It's really useful for an engineering guy too. Certainly was for me in terms of just some of the basics that go into selection of roads and vertical sizes and traffic information. So thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the close of debate. We have an amendment that we'll need to vote on the first instance. All in favour of C? Raise your hands. Those opposed? So from Mike not responding, I'm guessing he's in favour?
No, I'm okay with that.
Sorry?
Vote by division? What?
Sorry, what was that? Member Edmonds?
Yes, I'm in favour.
In favour, thank you. And so that's unanimous and carried. So now that becomes a substantive motion. So A, B and C, all in favour of A, B and C collectively?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Me.
Better not be.
Would you like that noted, Member Edmonds?
No, you all remember.
Thank you, I'm sure we will. And on that note, I think we need a cup of coffee and a 10-minute rest stop. And thank you for the debate. I knew this would be our longest item today. And thank you very much to the NTA, our CEO and General Manager, for their great work on this item. We need
wondering if we move
and we'll just await Casey to.
Light is on, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for now coming back into our public session. We have debated our roading issue about our project for roading sealing over the next 3 years. And we've got 2 items here on the agenda to attend to. Timing of such is opposite to what's in my online draft agenda. So the first being the monthly business report, item 6.1. Happy to move. Do a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Busich. And that opens it to the floor. I'm sure there'll be questions about this item, and our General Manager would like to speak.
Through the chair, thank you very much. Again, we're pleased to present this report to you, which outlines a summary of the business. A couple of really updates, and it is the NTA show today, so I'd just like to join in. So just bringing you to the capital programme, and what I would like to highlight is that this year we've spent 56.7 million out of 83, which is a 68.4% spend. 4 years ago, we were struggling to deliver 45% of the capital programme, so there's been a massive step up. But I'd also just like to commend the NTA, particularly they, out of their 30.7 million, they've spent 28.8 million, which is 94 to 95% of the budget. On top of that, they delivered the PTF roading projects as well. So, for want of a better word, the NTA and the rest of the team have knocked it out of the park in terms of delivery of the capital programme this year. So that's been a really good result, and I would like to highlight to you. I'd also like to just give you another piece of good news, and that relates to the TIF Round 5 funding, which is the Tourist Infrastructure Fund. You recall that elected members at this committee approved the submission of 6 bids to MB, and we weren't overly encouraged by the signals coming out of MB about the success of those bids. But I'm pleased to tell you that all 6 got approved. So they relate to lake manified toilets. That would be good to get that one off. Manawai toilets, Bailey Road seal. Serving well. The Waitangi Mountain Bike Park, Tipaki stream toilets, smart city Wi-Fi, network lighting, smart bins, and Tipaki dump station. All have been approved. So that's a good result for the team and for council, and we're looking forward to putting in around 6 submissions now.
Well done.
Thank you. And so we've got Calvin here from the NTA, if you'd like to just stand up. And we've got Aaron and Kushla there as well.
And Aaron.
And Aaron here as well. So a round of applause. Glenn, I know that you didn't stand up there, but you are our glue between FNDC and the NTA, so we'd like to give you a round of applause in your team. Wow, isn't that impressive? And I think that was the whole intent of the NTA, and to get things delivered, and isn't that fantastic that they're making it happen for the far north, and thank you to all the elected members for your support of our CEO and our decision to move to that joint structure. So I think that's celebrated as a good step from our council. And did you have any comments on that as the CEO?
Just to thank you for the thanks. It's taken a lot of patience from elected members over the 2 or 3 years of the most extreme evolution of the NTA. Kelvin's our celebrated leader from us in the Alliance Leadership Group, who are as operational board, and it's his leadership, not just on the technical stuff, but actually, interestingly, for an engineer, on the cultural side of what he's done with that organisation, which is something we're all trying to engineering on nowadays, so really good result. I think it comes out at about 97% when you take into consider the subsidised projects. So it's record-breaking stuff. Well done. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sean Alcier. I'm not sure if Calvin is an engineer, but.
No,
I'm an electrical engineer.
Oh, that explains this.
Learning fast about roads.
Thank you. Oh, well, on that note, we'll open it to the floor for any questions, concerns or matters raised about our very concise, very small monthly business report that we received.
I've got one question.
Thank you, councillors.
It's the first time I've ever noticed the standard for asset management in the compliance schedule. It's on page 171 or 170. And I wondered if there was something, like, is it in there because that's something that audit picked up on, or ISO 55000?
So
Page 117 of the agenda.
171. So this sheet. So that's a piece of work around looking at the standard, the international standard for asset management. We haven't yet arrived at a position where we can formally adopt or pay the money to become registered. But certainly looking at adopting the principles and the underlying rationale about asset management and alignment to the appropriate processes within the standard.
Yeah.
There is a cost of signing up and registering to the standard, and it is not just a one-off cost, it's a re-auditing cost. So we haven't yet arrived at a point where the cost benefit has been fully evaluated. But we're certainly following the principles.
Thank you. Probably a good thing, because we are in an improvement cycle on that.
Councillor Tripp, is that your only question?
Yeah, it is.
For the report?
Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to express I'll be voting against receiving this report today for a number of reasons. It's no secret that I take great interest in this report and often find myself with a lot of questions. However, I found a sense of deja vu when I was reading the report, specifically when I skimmed to my first item of reading Project Darwin and found that it was actually a copy of last month's report. This report is actually titled April 2021, and the resolution asks us to receive the report for May 2021. I'm not confident that there is new information in this report, so I'll be voting against it today, and because of that I'll remain, I won't ask any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Please may I have a response from our General Manager, CEO, about those concerns.
Through the Chair, then I'm aware that the report is quite clearly runs a month behind at least the committee cycles. So this report is April, and we're now in July, and that's just a timing issue around how far in advance that committee reports have to be prepared. The other issue around the inclusion of programme Darwin, I'll need to go back and check why that's happened, but certainly there was an update and it doesn't appear to have been included, so I'll need to check on that.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to respond to that. The report in our agenda is titled April 2021. It is the same report, in my opinion, that we received by resolution last month. And while the resolution for this particular item today is for May, I'm not confident that this is a May report, so I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And staff, they do note your concerns. If we can have a response from our General Manager and CEO just to clarify the comparison between the last report and this report, just to ensure that at the last infrastructure committee if the two reports differ or not.
Through the chair, I'd need to go away and do that.
Yes, thank you.
And I'll come back and clarify.
Thank you. Councillor Ankle.
I do have a question, and that is, what does the Farmers District Council wish to do about the recent announcements around the upgrade program? And it's a genuine and sincere question. You've all heard me wax lyrical about how concerned I am about the announcement. It is in the agenda. It's I'm on a paper copy, so it's 153-161. So just to recap, the government announced in 2019 a $6.6 billion roading package called the New Zealand Upgrade Program. There were 18 roading projects on that list. The 4-laning bridge that connects Northland to the rest of New Zealand was part of that project. In April this year, the Minister put together a working party which comprised representatives of Waka Kotahi, the Ministry of Transport and Kiwi Rail to revisit the New Zealand Upgrade Program, and he had three objectives. The objectives were affordability, degree of confidence of deliverability, and a contribution to reducing New Zealand greenhouse gas emissions. Those were the only three criteria that he required the working party to consider, and I know that because sadly I lagoimed all of the papers that informed the Minister's decision, and I've shared them with Mr Finch, and I've shared some of them with John Busich at length on the bus, and the Chief Executive, and the Mayor. The papers did not consider any other economic impact to Northland whatsoever. Based on the reports to the Minister, Waka Kotahi recommended that the 4-laning project between Northland and the rest of New Zealand be cancelled. Based on a degree of probability that they could not deliver the project on time and on budget. Waka Kotahi cautioned the Minister in the report not to rely on the assumptions because they were extremely high level and could not be validated, particularly the contribution to greenhouse gas reductions. Just to put it in context, because I have spent considerable time talking to the Minister and the Kōreriri, the money has been diverted for Kiwi Rail. Now, we all recognise that rail has a vital role to play in the integrated freight transport task. We know that. But to give you some perspective, 3% of New Zealand's total freight task is moved by rail. The freight task is expected to grow by 40% by 2030. We cannot expect rail to pick up the freight task for Northland. So I want to know what you want me to do, because I'm your representative on the Regional Land Transport Committee, and I've asked for this item to be brought to the next Regional Land Transport Committee, and I'm going to turn my iPad around. You want to just roll over? I expect at this point in the game we're not going to change the Minister's mind. But I think we need to go back. My personal preference is that the only people that are going to fight for Northland are Northlanders. So I need a mandate from this council. What do you want to do? That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. For those that can't see the iPad,
how can you not see that?
For those that can't see it, media admins, it says control your own destiny or someone else will in bold letters. So that's the message that Councillor Ford is asking us today. And sorry, Councillor Court, are you asking for that to be part of a formal
I would like a full
Motion.
resolution. I'm going to go to Whangarei on Friday night. The road, I'm trying to think of the proper name, Northland Roading something, it's the same as the NRC, so I always get myself confused. Nick Leggett's coming up, it was the one that you and I were going to go to tomorrow night, are coming up to talk about the trucking challenges in Northland. I'm going to go down to Whangarei and I'm going to attend that session on Friday night. But we're facing significantly reduced funding. We know that our operations, maintenance and renewal budget has been cut by 17 million. We won't know the outcome of our capital works program until late August, early September, but Waka Kotahi are already signalling that it's going to be significantly modified. And now we've got our 4-laning is off the table. So I don't have a mandate to go out there and lobby and advocate on behalf of Northland on my own. I do need a mandate from the council. And if it's, hey Anne, pick your battles, this is not one we should fight, that's your message. I hope it's not, but I just would like to have that conversation. And I don't have any other avenue to bring it forward at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Court. If any other elected members have any comments or concerns or don't support Councillor Court and having that mandate, please have that discussion.
I'm certainly happy to comment, as I have done and done publicly. Northland is one of the, I'm talking about the, including Whangarei and Kaikoura and us. So that is defined as one of the only of 3 that actually show an increase in GDP, and our traffic numbers have increased 35%, I believe, overall, and we are killing more people than here we are. So I think we've got a strong case, and Councillor Court, you've got that mandate, and you're sitting on the Land Transport Committee to actually argue, so I believe they actually got it to argue in our favour. I personally am very disappointed, as also known publicly, that the priorities of pulling that 4-laning and then the saving on emissions just doesn't make sense. You're not saving on emissions because one thing you can do is increase the efficiency of road transport, and you immediately save on emissions. And in terms of rail, the biggest saving they can make on emissions is very clear, and was actually tried many years ago, and I think reversed, and that is to electrify the main truck line. And that would be the sensible thing to do. And that should be their focus. To have actually road users who are paying for the use of that road, having that money diverted, I think is not really the right way it should be done. I think it should be part of the argument, because road users are actually paying for the use of that road. If there's an overall benefit to New Zealand and the planet for rail, I'm not against rail. I think it's good, but all the New Zealand taxpayers, so find another fund to fund it that way and push the money where your mouth is, so to speak. But to seem to see huge amount of money, you're talking about risk for like was it $750 million for a cycle lane over the Harbour Bridge? I would think that's a high risk of actually not even coming to fruition and probably blowing out. So to see priorities put out because there seems to be great and signal sort of intentions and maybe getting voting, dare I say it, or from out of the main populist area is not something that I'm impressed with. And you see what's actually happening when I said before, when people are actually getting hurt and product being delayed from going to our markets up here in the area that is grown up.
Did you have any comments about the general report?
Yeah, I'd say that Council Court through the Northern Transport Alliance should be putting out a strong message and get that across the table. As far as I'm concerned, as a councillor up here, I would support it to do that. But put the arguments together solidly and push it.
It will require resourcing. Well, I can't do this on my own. I'm going to make a sustained case. He's going to need some evidence behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. I'm sure that the discussion about resourcing with our CEO will be discussed. And if it's not within his delegations, we'll need to have a special meeting to ensure that there's a council resolution to ensure resources are available. Councillor, did you have any comments about the monthly report other than?
No, it was actually raised before and noted that this date, which I was hoping that Andy would say, well, that was a mistype on the front there.
But it's not.
But it's not. So that is something that needs to be polished up for sure. The only comment I'm making is page 131. Yeah, there is actually, it makes mention of a high risk, so I'm looking for high risk. And is there a potential cost? That may be on that scheme, and I'm just wondering what that might be, but I suspect at this stage, in this context, you'll probably come up to that, so I'm happy about that.
Thank you, Councillor Yusuf. Anything would you like, as the general manager, to respond to what Councillor Yusuf brought up in light of the matters raised by Councillor?
So it looks as though inadvertently the April and not the May attachment have been attached to the report, so I need to ensure that doesn't happen again. So my apologies to council.
So, excuse me, through the chair, so we've got is that the same as the hard copy and the soft copy?
I wouldn't see a reason why it would be different.
This makes a difference to what's being approved today, then we've got material on the table.
Thank you. So we've got further commentary around this. This is just an information report, but Councillor Smith, do you have further comments about the report, or Councillor?
I just wanted to respond to the request from Councillor Ford. I'm in full support of all of those in our country privileged enough to hold a decision-making position that they utilise as evidence-based as much as possible. Not confident that decision was based on evidence, and I would like to think that going forward, those decisions made on our behalf protect our democratic well-being and ensure that they are evidence-based. I did want to put up, when Taranaki were faced with losing their oil market industry, they demanded that central government fund them what is called a just transition document. And that is an MBIE funded process that has gone into defining the future and how central government will work with communities on achieving that just transition. So a just transition, according to the MB website, is, sorry, I found the words and now I can't. The government has committed to making this process a just transition, one that is fair, equitable and inclusive. A just transition is about making sure that the government works in partnership to manage the impacts and maximise the opportunities of the changes brought about by the transitions to a low emissions economy. I think it's safe to say that around this table we all agree that the far north and Northland in particular is very different to a lot of the rest of the country in terms of the way that we will respond to climate change. That's no argument here. And for me, it's about understanding what that transition looks like. So I'd be in support of you advocating on our behalf, but also for potentially exploring for us to advocate for Northland, through Northland Forward Together, to go through that process with MBIE and understand what is fair and equitable, taking into consideration the deprivation in our communities and how we look at addressing our reduction in emissions, but at the same time balancing that with the other well-beings. And balanced well-beings is something that we talk about at this table a lot at the moment, and I see this as a really good opportunity to look at what that might be. So this could be a good avenue to start that conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I have some comments. I can't see any other matters being raised by other elected members. First and foremost, I wanted to extend my support to Councillor Cord in her role, and she's very hardworking in this space and very experienced and knowledgeable. So Thank you for the work that you do in the roading space, councillor Court, and yes, we need to ensure that we're heard, because we don't need Northland to be silent about being underinvested in once again. And the statistics that Councillor Busich has raised in regard to GDP generation and increased traffic movements should be relevant, and the business case should support decisions made by government when local government has to have significant information and significant financial planning in advance for many years, and the government, central government, can just make decisions at the flick of their fingers with not necessarily having the business case. I don't find to be fair or reasonable in any which way or form, and I think that that we need to be accountable for all of our decisions, including central government. So thank you for taking that lead, and please make all of council aware if you need further financial assistance and resources that extend above and beyond the CEO's delegation. I've got some questions about the monthly report. So on the spreadsheet on the back of page 172 of the report, it talks about water modelling requirements, storm water modelling requirements, wastewater modelling requirements, and data clean/tidy up. So my question interrelates with Councillor Smith's questions about the progress of Project Darwin, but specifically my question as well relates to wastewater modelling. It just says as above. However, the wastewater modelling, my question is, which wastewater systems have been modelling first, and why, and how does this relate to consideration of area of benefit changes and our connections policy for our current district plan change relating to densities within any reticulated urban catchments?
I'll turn my computer around so you can see we actually have a matrix as well. It's not just the game. We love it.
Thank you.
So in the one of the projects in the DIA funded program is about network modelling, and we do have all of our networks, all 39 of our networks listed to get modelling work done. So capacity analysis has been done, gap analysis is in progress and is due to finish at the end of this month. Some may go a little bit into August because we did have some missing data that we've had to try and locate. So the gap analysis is happening for everything. The priorities have been determined by population growth and in case of stormwater, some of the risk elements included in the stormwater strategy. So that's how those have been determined. So population growth has been a big driver for this. In the wastewater category, let me just pull those ones up in particular. We expect that, so let me just check. We expect, I think it's, 9 of the 16 will be fully updated. We are going to do flow monitoring on another 5, but in the time frame that we have to spend the money allocated from the DIA, we'll only have time to actually either to update 9 of the models. Okay, so we can actually, so the priority, so those will be East Coast, Hihi, Kaikoui, Kaitaia, Kawakawa, Kerikeri, Paihia, Rangiputa and Patafifi. Those will be the models that will be completed, most of them by the end of this year. 2 will go into February.
Thank you, Helen. Can you please clarify, is that separate, the reticulation, the pipes, to that of the treatment capacity of the system?
Both will be looked at. The modelling for both will be done.
Thank you. So that will be in time for the new district plan as well.
We are feeding. We've prioritised a couple of the activities specifically for district plan input.
Thank you very much for that detail. I think that that's important for elected members as well to know that one department, you know, is doing work to ensure the outcomes for another department, because that isn't apparent in this report without me asking that question
Sure.
today. And
Sure, no, we're definitely working with the district plan team, so the planning teams, the development teams and asset management are all working on this network modelling project, and then we're also feeding into the district plan activities.
Thank you. And how does that interrelate with Project Darwin and the updates that we might be receiving about that?
So this will feed, so the network modelling per se doesn't feed Program Darwin, but they will probably, some of the information will definitely be used when we have the asset management system capability, because of the fact that some of the data that we're actually missing today for some of those things that we're having to either extrapolate, estimate, or determine and use determinants of other kinds, we will actually have that information in the system, because we'll have those parameters and metrics available to us that we currently don't have.
Thank you, Helen. That's the question that I had, and we've got Councillor Porter's got a question about
An
that.
ancillary question to that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Tomorrow we're having a housing workshop, and there's a very aggressive growth agenda that the government is rolling out in regard to affordable housing and more housing stock. And concurrent to that, last week at the conference, the government announced this funding package. Have you heard of this funding package?
The infrastructure acceleration?
No, this is a brand
Oh,
new
this
package
is-
of 30.
Oh, this is the 35 million for us? Yep, the Better Off Fund.
I think million, I forget the exact amount. And they were quite clear that the objective was that we would take this money to use it for delivering on the housing agenda in a green way that objective gave effect to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions and a whole bunch of other stuff. So my question is, long way around it, how are we ready for the task? Is the information that you're producing now going to help us to decide, make some decisions that we have to make in a really short space of time on how we're going to accommodate and where we're going to accommodate all this additional growth in the district? And I did pose a question yesterday in a slightly different format to the strategy committee, that I'm not sure we fully understand where we can accommodate all of this here.
Do you want me to answer, Andy?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
No, but Andy might want to. We haven't rehearsed this, so he might not be prepared for what I'm going to say.
Just bountiful knowledge.
No, that is not me. Mostly it's sitting over there.
So that's a really big question, and the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, we are putting together a team that's looking at how we respond to that, and it's largely going to be externally driven in terms of the applications from housing developers, whatever flavour they take, they will be approaching council. So we have limited influence around which sites are coming forward for bids to that fund. And we only have until, I believe, the 13th of August to put an expression of interest in sites, and they will then be filtered. So it is an ongoing, and we're not sure yet of the level of detail that will be needed for the expression of interest. And there's a conference either today, or a conference call either today or tomorrow, and a workshop on the 22nd of July, just to flesh that out a little bit more. So the detail behind that is unclear at this point. Do we have all the information necessary? Probably not at this point. We are the ones that we're looking at, or the ones that we know about. We're starting to put a bit more resource into looking at capacity and ability to absorb additional connections in one hit, along with the roading implications as well. Does that
The
answer?
concern was specifically in relation to the waters at this point. I do acknowledge the roading one. And I'm just wondering how we can capture the information that's been harvested over here, if it's in a state that it's ready to be harvested, to help inform that conversation, because I don't want it to be largely development driven. Council needs to be at the table as an equal partner, because we will be funding the infrastructure. And I'm concerned also that if we just leave two areas where we have capacity, that might not be the best outcome. We actually need people where there's employment and schooling and transport and all of those other fine things that will enable better outcomes. It's not just about saying we've got some spare land and some spare capacity over here. We need to drive the growth of this district in a sustainable way.
Through the chair, I think there's a couple of, certainly there is a lack of clarity around what the different funds are being used for. My understanding, and it could be wrong, the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund is to provide infrastructure to allow developers of whatever flavour they look at to be able to provide low-cost housing for disadvantaged communities. And the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, in my understanding, will provide additional money over and above the 35 million Better Off Fund to support additional infrastructure to allow further housing to take place. So that will be largely iwi developer driven in terms of the sites that come forward from that. The 35 million Better Off Fund would be related to district plan growth and our response to how we can provide the infrastructure to meet the growth nodes that are identified in the district plan. So there seems to be two sets of funds that are sitting in parallel. And in both cases, we don't yet know the rules and the conditions that will be attached to drawing down those funds. The devil is always in the detail.
So notwithstanding all of that, my question is, is your information mineable and ready to support that?
Part of it is already. So we already know about, so the capacity analysis has been, there's two stages to it, and the first stage is complete, so we can use that, and we are using that already when we're having a look at one of the developments. So we are using that. We're also, so the information is available, but it's not in an analytical state at the moment. So it's not as if we're using the science to inform our decisions yet, but it is able to anecdotally do that because of what we've learned through the process. So we are able to actually, so it's not a data mining thing yet, it's not an analytical outcome, but we are able to use the learnings that we've gained as we've gone through the process. Okay.
Thank you. And my final question was part of my original question, but I don't know if it's been answered for timeframe. So you will have the data for those 9 wastewater treatment.
We'll have the models.
Reticulation, so we'll have the models. Will that align with a new connections policy that aligns with the new district plan at the end of this year?
No, because some of them won't be complete by then.
But for the 9 that are complete?
So 7 should be complete by the end of the year, but whether they're complete in time to feed formally into the district plan, we don't know. But as we are sharing information as we go along, so that if they need any information, we're taking what we can from the activities to date.
Thank you, Helen. So as elected members and as a risk, I wanted to highlight that a connections policy for a council should be a standard requirement and needs to feed between the infrastructure department and the district plan and gives clear, concise direction to both governance and then also feeds into our development contributions policy. So that needs to be part of our reporting and the milestones that we'll need to meet and the timeframes that will be achieved, even if it's just, one wastewater treatment system or town at a time. Within that policy. Okay. So thank you for that. So we are at 12 noon now. We've got one item to go. This is just receiving the report. It's been moved and seconded, and I know from our general manager that the May reporting will be circulated, and he's going to double check that and circulate to the committee.
May is on the website, but it's not. Mrs. Mulliner.
So it's been clarified that May is on the website.
So we need this report for a while.
And can you clarify,
Sorry, Mr.
Councillor Usich is asking if we let this lie on the table if this information is correct, and there's just one aspect of the report that needs to be updated.
I need to check that. That's what I need to sit down and compare the last report here to.
So in the meantime, it should lie on the table. We don't have access to the online copy and it hasn't been read by elected members, so I suggest that we need to sort this out through apologies for it.
I don't know whether that's just because I'm stupid, that I just wasted an hour of my life reading it again. I didn't notice it was exactly the same. But either way, we're shouting the chocolate fish.
We're not actually sure ourselves because you notice on page 111 on the financial reports, the 30th of April reports possibly have been reported for May. So there are indications in here that we've got, there's ambiguity, so we just rely on the table until we've got a chance to.
You'll find the May version in LG Hub if you've got access to it.
Thank you. So as the mover, I'm happy to let move the lie on the table. Councillor Usich is the seconder. So all in favour to have the lie on the table?
Thank you to Councillor Smith for her eagle eyes.
I thought it was.
Thank you. All in favour, sorry?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So that will lie on the table. We've got one item to complete for our agenda today, and that's the action sheet. Thank you, Councillor Usich. I'm happy to second. And we have this on the table now. Do we have any comments or feedbacks about the action sheet? Thank you, Councillor Usich. So it's on page 273.
There was some outstanding reports as I found that have actually been there outstanding for quite some time. And just wondering when that will come. If you look at page 1 of the action sheet, there's those two slides. The 3 quarters program of works, and no reason I presume that is still really acting on it, that the committee requests an update on Curry Dam at the next infrastructure committee meeting, and that was on the 9th of 2020. So presumably that's not being done. And the second one, in a similar manner, there is a notice there that infrastructure committee requests the committee to provide with time for the work to be undertaken. We requested the report, and this is referring to so, and that report is basically asking for the final cost. I presume the work's been done on the Zelensky property. I think that was resolved very quickly. The trees are gone, it's all happened. So I saw the action on the city at noon, we were just waiting for the report to show.
Thank you.
So through the chair, the Carry Dam, there was a verbal report given at the next infrastructure committee on that, but it would have been a while back now, and clearly the issue around the Carry Dam would be related to the Kaitaia water project, which we have now got resolution, so we will be looking at that again. The trees, Glenn can comment a little bit more. The work has been done, and I understand the finances have been finally bottomed out, and the report will be coming after that's been concluded. Do you want to add anything more to that, Glenn?
Yes, through the chair, correct. I've actually only just received the final piece through in relation to costs about 10 days ago, so there will be a report coming. So the March report gave an indication as to what the costs of sales and net income we would get, which netted out at about 44k. The good news is that the cost, the sale price has really skyrocketed. So we're actually the net revenue back was 190k or thereabouts. Out of that, of course, we will need to put some sums aside, as the resolution said, for replanting down the track. So, but certainly the outcome in terms of achieving the removal of those dangerous trees, hazardous trees, and the harvesting has needed to a good result for us.
Yeah, thanks, good. So maybe we can, that's a good example of all our projects that need to be delivered money back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Yesich, and your note, I'm sure that had a bit of influence into that inside knowledge of the cost of forestry. So thank you for your input there. We've got Councillor Smith and Councillor Strick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to request that going forward, this action sheet has a notes column on the end with commentary around these resolutions, like our other action sheets do. It's really useful to have that commentary so that we know where each of those things is up to. And this is simply just missing that column. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and our general manager is just noting that.
Through the chair, that's a similar request to all the other committees today, so we'll obviously leave that with our colleague Will to resolve the problems.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one item, or one matter to raise on page 274. It just rates the Far North Borders Alliance Agreement. In there it talks about the Cully Dam update, but we've got member Gardner here today, and at our community board meeting it was raised about the Water Services Alliance Agreement and how that interrelates with the drainage districts in Taku. We're the only area that has drainage districts, and there were maybe 10 people that came representing the drainage districts, and a member of staff, Glenn Raynham, was present at the meeting, as well as our stormwater staff. And it's just been raised that there's been a change in process, and that may have unintendedly resulted from the new Water Services Alliance Agreement. And I feel that this is maybe one of the things we need to iron out for when we consider the new Three Waters scope, because drainage districts have been around for 100 years and they're not urban stormwater, they're not reticulated pipes. So I'm not sure how the cookie cutter is going to address that, because Far North is in Taku only has drainage districts, but also Kaipara has them as well that I'm aware of. And so there will be similar concerns across Northland for those areas that do have these drainage districts. So I just wanted to raise that, and I'm not sure if Andy or Glenn have any updates about the drainage district concerns and escalating costs and not approving works within reasonable timeframes, so the works were occurring in winter instead of summer. Did we have any response or timeframes that matter will be addressed, or Member Gardner, did you have any comments about that?
As far as I'm aware, there will be a meeting, thanks, a meeting on the 16th of August. Yes, hopefully for the drainage districts. Perhaps it might be, we'll hear the more concerns, and some of these concerns will be addressed.
Thank you, and I just want to raise that to the Infrastructure Committee, and that maybe we need to approach because, as we're aware, the Three Waters reforms are looming, and we need to ensure that all of these issues are ironed out.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, so the Three Waters reform is only urban stormwater, does it not? It doesn't address rural stormwater, is that right? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mem, again. I think that that's the point that we need clarified, because currently our council is administering that, and we're doing that through our Three Waters Alliance. That we would be doing for our Three Waters Alliance. However, we need to ensure that anything we do is transferable, or if that's outside the scope of the new Three Waters or not. So,
That question was put to Nanaia Mahuta at the
Okay.
conference last week. I'm trying to remember what she replied. I think she was unclear herself. Can either of you two gentlemen remember what she said?
I heard, that was correct, but I also heard that it probably may fall under the funding that's going to those catchment areas. The drainage catchment areas.
My recollection is sorry, Madam Chair, I'm not clear, I should be, because I was there. My recollection is that she ruled that out, urban, rural stormwater drainage. It's not part of what she was looking at.
thank you. So we'll just highlight that to Glenn and our alliance, as well as our asset management team, that we'll need to ask those questions in advance, and we may need to look at the way we're currently managing drainage districts, and if that aligns with
The mayor told me to.
the way forward that central government is providing direction. Thank you. So that brings our meeting to a close. So we've moved that, seconded, all in favour of the action sheet? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. So thank you for your attendance today. We're coming early, and which is always good. And so if we can have a karakia to close our very today.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, kia ata whaia tō tātou ariki, me te aroha, me te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, 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 amen.